When I was growing up, my mom used to do this thing with me and my brother and sister, and I do the same thing with my kids. And I hold my hands like this far apart, and I say, "Do I love you this much?" And they say no. And I hold my hands like this far apart, and I say, "Do I love you this much?" And they say no. And on and on and on, and we keep going wider and wider and wider, and the answer is always no. And we finally get to the place where I'm just like this, and it's beyond reach, and there's no way to reach that, how much I love my kids. And they know that the answer is always no, that there's never a limit to my love for them. And I was raised by a woman who loved me that way too. And one of the things, I would say the most important thing that I've done with my life, is to try to bring that love that lives, within each of us forever, if any of us have ever been loved like that by anyone, and make it alive in my life and in the world. And I do it with my kids, and I try to do it in the column. I hope that's apparent. I really tried to, when I first started writing the sugar column, I thought, well, what if I gave advice with that kind of fearlessness that didn't have to do necessarily with a kind of scandalous revelation, but rather a really, really radical sincerity. And that felt really risky to me at first, because I think that, when I first started going to the Rumpus, my first thought was that all of those people were way cooler than me, that they were all these hipsters who lived in San Francisco, and, I was just like, Mom, And so I thought, there's no way in hell they're going to think I'm cool, and it's because I'm going to be a sincere, geek. And I told both Stephen Elliott and Steve Almond that the very first night when they asked me to be sugar. I said, look, I'm going to have to do my thing. I'm going to be sincere. And are you going to roll with that? And Isaac was in on this conversation too, and Isaac and Stephen Elliott were like, oh, okay, They didn't know who I was, and all they had was Steve Almond emailing them going, no, she's really great, she's, yeah. And so I wrote this column where I was always trying to do this. I was always trying to answer the questions as if there was all that I was going to try to give you, so much love. And what was the most surprising thing to me, by far, was how much you all gave that back to me. I mean, I just really, it still stuns me. It still doesn't seem like that could exist. And there isn't really a way for me to explain it to people who aren't in Sugarland and who don't do this thing. Because it just sounds like that them started bragging, like, yeah, I read this column and everyone loves it and it's so nice to me. But what's really great, it's as if, and maybe being sugar has allowed me in some ways to stand back from it and have some perspective. And what's interesting to me is that it feels very much like it's not me and that it's us. And it feels funny to me to be standing on this stage above you guys, because actually I think that, as I said earlier, I can't do that. I can't do it without you. And I think of all the heart that you give me, and I feel that same stretch. I feel that same reach. When you write to me, when you tweet, when you post things on Facebook and in the comments, and it's really a tremendous thing. And so much of what we, my first writing gig when I was 18, I got a job actually being paid as a writer. I got a job for the Aiken Independent Age, which is this small county newspaper in the rural county where I grew up in northern Minnesota. And my job was to just cover the news in Aiken County all summer long. I worked full-time, 5 days a week. I covered the city council meetings and the farmers, convention meeting, which actually did happen. And but most of the time I was just left to my own devices. And so what I did is I would just drive around looking for news, and there was no news. Except the first day of my job, there was big news, but that's a whole different story. I'll have to tell you some other time. But I would do things like, if I drove by a house where obviously crazy people live because there were like 300 birdhouses in the yard, I would stop and knock on the door and say, can I do a story about your birdhouse collecting thing? And they would say, well, okay. You know, or if somebody went to Spain, like in the 60s for a year, you know, I did a story on this woman because she lived in Spain for a year. I'm not going to, like the whole story was like 30 years ago she lived in Spain. And, which, you know, I came from a really, really, you know, rural place. I grew up 20 miles from the town of McGregor, which had 400 people. So I didn't have electricity or running water or indoor plumbing when I was growing up. And so it was a very rural place. And like I did, you know, if somebody, like they repainted retro cars, he got a story, you know, that was the news. And I was thinking, I really think that in some ways, that job had so much, it contributed so much to the writer I am, but specifically to what I do as Sugar. And that is what I learned so deeply that summer is that the ordinary is extraordinary, that there's no such thing as, you know, the cool people who make the rumpus. It's us, you know, and we all feel alone and sad and embarrassed and all those things. And we all think the other is better or more interesting. And I certainly thought that as a little small town girl from northern Minnesota. But all those people, you know, that woman who went to Spain, she had a story to tell, you know, and I helped her tell it. And I helped the people around her see the extraordinary in this totally ordinary woman's life. And I think in the column, what you did is you brought your problems to me. And a lot of you thought those problems were, you know, you felt secret and alone in them. And then I published them and the whole world opened up and said, me too. And I said that to you too. I said, it's okay that you feel that way. And everyone seconded that emotion. They all said that too. And, you know, I think that's radical. And I think it's as important or more important than, you know, writing about socially significant things or political things or whatnot. The advice column and the small town newspaper, you know, they're belittled. But I think that they can be really big if we let them be. And you guys let them be big. So thank you.